Imagine saving up for years, finally buying your dream lake cabin, only to wake up one day and find out the HOA decided it actually belongs to someone else just because they said so. That's exactly what happened to me, and I thought this cabin by the water was going to be my peaceful escape, a place for fishing trips, quiet mornings, and family weekends. But instead, it turned into a battlefield the moment the HOA president, a woman everyone in town called Karen, got involved. Karen had this way of acting like the whole neighborhood was her personal kingdom. Rules only mattered when they worked in her favor, and if she didn't like you, she'd make your life miserable. At first, it was little things, letters about the color of my mailbox, notes about where I parked, but it quickly escalated when I learned she had bigger plans. Out of nowhere, she claimed the cabin wasn't mine to begin with, that the HOA had control over it, and she signed it over to her son as if it was hers to give away. I couldn't believe it. Years of hard work, money invested, and paperwork, all ignored like none of it mattered. Karen's son moved in overnight, acting smug and untouchable, like the lake cabin had always been his. Neighbors whispered, but no one dared to challenge her. But here's the part she didn't see coming, because while Karen thought she had one, I was already planning something that would turn everything upside down. And when I made my move, it didn't just shake her. It shook the entire HOA. When I first bought the cabin, I went through every proper step: title search, deed transfer, even extra checks to make sure there weren't any hidden HOA clauses tied to the property. Everything was clean. That's why it hit me so hard when Karen pulled her stunt. She waved around some outdated HOA rulebook like it was the law of the land, claiming the cabin was still community-owned. In reality, it was just her way of controlling people and rewarding her family. The more I looked into it, the more I realized this wasn't the first time she had done something shady. A neighbor told me Karen once forced an older couple to pay thousands in violation fines just to keep their garden shed. Another family mentioned she tried to block them from renting their place on the lake because she wanted her friends to get priority. It was like she thrived on fear, and everyone just gave in to avoid the fight. Her son moving into my cabin was the last straw. He didn't even try to be subtle about it. He'd sit out on the porch, waving at me smugly whenever I came by, acting like I was trespassing on my own land. I started gathering every document I had, every receipt and legal paper proving ownership. But I also knew Karen played dirty. Logic and fairness weren't going to stop her. That's when I started thinking differently. If the HOA thought they had power over me, maybe it was time to show them what real ownership looked like. And the way I planned to do it would leave Karen speechless. The tension in the neighborhood grew thicker by the day. Some of my neighbors quietly pulled me aside, saying they supported me but were too afraid to speak up. They had seen what Karen could do when someone challenged her. She'd bury people in endless HOA fines, block their access to community spaces, and even spread rumors to turn others against them. It wasn't just about my cabin anymore, it was about control. She had built a culture of silence, and I had unwillingly become the one person willing to push back. I spent nights researching property law, digging through county records, and meeting with a local attorney who dealt with shady HOA boards. That's when I learned something Karen probably didn't expect. Technically owned not just the cabin, but also a small strip of the land that stretched right up to the HOA office building. It had been overlooked for years, probably because no one thought it mattered. But suddenly, that overlooked detail became my greatest weapon. Meanwhile, Karen's son acted like the lake was his private resort. He threw loud parties, left trash on the shoreline, and even told a few neighbors they weren't allowed to fish near his dock. The arrogance was unbearable. But instead of getting angry, I stayed quiet and kept watching. Every smug look, every careless act only fueled me more. Behind the scenes, I was laying the groundwork for something big. The HOA thought they could intimidate me into giving up, but I was preparing a move that would hit them where it hurt most. And once I put it into motion, there would be no going back. Every morning, I drove past the HOA office watching Karen and her son go about. Their routine as if nothing was wrong. She'd sit behind her desk, flipping through papers with that same smug smile, completely unaware that the land I had quietly purchased gave me leverage she could never anticipate. The irony wasn't lost on me. Years of intimidation, endless rules and threats, all while the real power had been slipping through her fingers without her noticing. I started leaving small signs of my presence on the property soodle, almost invisible reminders that the land was mine. A corner of the driveway marked differently, a few posts along the boundary subtly reinforced. Karen noticed, of course, but she brushed it off, thinking I was just being difficult. She had no idea that every action I took was part of a bigger plan, one that would force her and her son into a corner they couldn't escape. Neighbors began noticing tension too. Whispers spread about my secret strategy, though no one knew exactly what I was planning. Some offered advice, others warned me that Karen was unpredictable, that she could turn the smallest challenge into a drawn-out war. But at this point, I had to trust my gut. I had spent months preparing, mapping every angle, and anticipating every move they might make. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the lake and cast long shadows across the water, I finally made my move. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but the effect was immediate. The tension in the air was palpable. Karen's usual confidence began to crack, and for the first time, I saw hesitation in her eyes. Everything was about to come to a head, and I knew there was no turning back. What happened next would change everything for the HOA and for my lake cabin. Just when I thought I had Karen cornered, the situation took an unexpected turn. One morning, I received a call from the county office. Someone had filed a formal complaint against me. My heart sank as I listened, realizing Karen had somehow gotten a lawyer to submit papers claiming I was trespassing on HOA property. It was a bold move, and suddenly the quiet confidence I had built started to feel shaky, but instead of panicking, I saw it for what it was, a classic Karen power play, desperate and reckless. At the same time, her son began acting even more brazen. He started bringing in friends, claiming the dock and even part of the shoreline as his space. Laughing at anyone who questioned him, the neighbors were watching, whispering, and some began to doubt if I could really push back. Tension in the community grew. It felt like everyone was waiting for the next move, holding their breath. Meanwhile, I discovered another layer to the property issue. Buried deep in the county records was a small easement connected to my land that gave me rights over access roads leading directly to the HOA office. It was a tiny legal detail, easy for most people to overlook, but in the right hands, it was a game changer. Suddenly, I had more leverage than Karen could imagine, and the thought of finally turning the tables filled me with cautious excitement. The lake was quiet that evening, but inside, everything was buzzing with anticipation. Karen had no idea that her own overconfidence had set the stage for what was coming. Every smug look, every careless move had just brought her closer to a reckoning she couldn't foresee. And I knew that the moment of confrontation was almost here, one move away from shaking the HOA to its core. The day finally came when everything collided. I arrived early, carrying the paperwork that proved my ownership of both the cabin and the strip of land leading to the HOA office. Karen was already inside, sipping her morning coffee, radiating the same false confidence that had fooled the neighborhood for years. Her son lounged on the porch, smirking like he owned the place. But this time, the smirk would fade fast. I calmly walked up to the office doors and, without a word, locked them from the outside using a legal access point one now controlled. Karen's jaw dropped, and for the first time she couldn't summon a rulebook or a threat that could undo what I had done. The office, which had always been her fortress, was now under my control. The tension was unbearable. Neighbors peeked through windows, witnessing the showdown silently unfold. Karen tried to argue, to shout, to claim illegal tactics, but every word fell flat. I had documented every step, legally, every purchase, every easement, every boundary line. Her son scrambled, looking for a way out, but there was none. Finally, the woman who had bullied so many in the neighborhood for years was trapped, forced to face the reality she had ignored for too long. Just when I thought it was over, a surprising twist changed everything again. A county inspector arrived, revealing that the small strip of land I had relied on for leverage wasn't fully cleared in the records. It technically belonged to a conservation trust, not me. The lock I had set was only a temporary victory. Karen's eyes widened as I realized we both had new challenges ahead. And the lake cabin, the office, and the neighborhood were about to enter yet another unpredictable chapter. Even in victory, the story wasn't finished, and one thing was clear with the HOA. Nothing ever stayed simple for long. After the county inspector revealed the twist about the conservation trust, the tension that had gripped the lake neighborhood for weeks didn't vanish instantly. I had thought locking the HOA office would be the ultimate victory, but suddenly it became clear that this was just another layer in a long, complicated battle. Karen's face went from shock to frustration, then to begrudging respect. Even she had to admit I had outsmarted her, at least for now. The inspector guided us through the proper steps to clarify the boundaries and rights. And surprisingly, he validated much of what I had been claiming about the cabin and the land. In the end, the trust agreed to let me maintain access to the office path temporarily, giving me the leverage I needed to resolve the conflict peacefully. Karen had no choice but to accept the compromise, and her son retreated, visibly humbled, realizing that arrogance and shortcuts couldn't override legality and persistence. Neighbors came by afterward, congratulating me quietly, some with relief and others with admiration. They shared stories of Karen's past schemes and thanked me for standing up not just for my cabin, but for fairness in the community. The lake that had once felt like a battlefield slowly returned to being the peaceful retreat I had dreamed of. Fishing trips, morning coffees by the water, and quiet evenings became possible again. Now with a story to remind everyone that standing up for yourself matters. Looking back, the whole ordeal taught me patience, strategy, and the importance of knowing your rights. Karen had tried to control the neighborhood, but persistence and careful planning had turned the tables. In the end, my lake cabin wasn't just a property, became a symbol of resilience and the quiet power of standing your ground. The HOA would always have its rules. I had finally reclaimed my peace.